Previously on agentpalmer.com, Like a Rolling Stone wonderfully orchestrates the work of journalist Ben Fong-Torres. The brilliance of Letterman's Netflix show needs no introduction, and while Zach's podcast is great to get you into the kitchen, Kristen Meyer's blog should give you inspiration for what to do when you get there. This is the Palmer Files, episode 74 with Janice Webber, a longtime physiotherapist who is taking her business sense and her artistic abilities and looking to create an art academy. We discuss how she arrived where she is, what she's learned along the way, what it means to create more and stress less, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 74th episode is Janice Webber, who wants us all to create more and stress less. She's a physiotherapist by trade, but that isn't who she is. She's an entrepreneur and an artist of many mediums. We discuss her past, which feeds directly to her present, and where she hopes her future lies. And it's amazing how relevant all of her experiences have been and how many full circle moments arise during our conversation. You'll also hear how Janice is a dabbler, how there is sanity in creativity and creation, global versus linear thinking, becoming a teacher, helping others find their outlet, saving the oceans, the status quo, treading water, hobbies. All of that and a whole lot more is coming your way shortly. But first, if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer and this show at The Palmer Files. You can find more information about Janice at janicewebber.com. That's JANICEWEBBER.com. From there, you can also contact Janice or join her on Facebook, as well as see her work in painting, pottery, and photography. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's create something together. Janice, you are a physiotherapist and, I guess, entrepreneur, artist, teacher extraordinaire, all of those hats?
Kind of. I'm have my own physio business and I'm an artist. So I decided to see if I could make it an art business in 2019. So I've been educating myself a lot since then.
Now, I want to talk about physio for a moment because I don't know why I know physio equals physiotherapy. Because I've never
same thing.
I've never had it. And I don't know where that knowledge comes from, but I also don't know what a physiotherapist does.
So we're someone you come to if you've got a pain problem, limited mobility, might have respiratory problems, could be recovering from a stroke or other neurological problems like Parkinson's, been in a car accident, need help recovering. So we're, I call it movement specialists, in that we can look at what's going on, figure out what you need, and start treatment. And then you get what my clients love me to say is homework, which is your exercises to do afterwards.
And how long have you been doing that?
36 years.
Is that like, did you originally go to school for that?
I went to university at Dalhousie and became a physiotherapist. Yeah.
Okay. No change of major. Like you weren't like, I might be a, something else.
Well, when I started, I wasn't going to be a physio. I was going to be an oceanographer because I love the ocean.
Okay.
I got an interview for physio and then went into that.
Okay.
Still love the ocean.
Does the ocean figure into the art?
Yes.
Okay. So you're bringing the bacon home. You're paying the bills with physio for 36 years.
Yes.
Is the art there? Does it come and go?
Oh, it's always been there.
Okay.
I just ended up being a dabbler, as they call it. So you do it and people think it's your hobby.
Yep.
But it was how I kept sane. Physio is a very demanding job physically and mentally. When you're hearing people's problems and they're looking to you for solutions, and then you need to come up with a plan and get their agreement, and then you work away at it. So yeah, it's a demanding job. So the art was a way to deal with the stress of the job.
Okay. And I'm trying to think, like, you know, I've had a blog and I've had a podcast, and these things have only been, the blog's 11, the podcast is not that old. I don't know what I did before to keep sane. Like, now this is my passion and my hobby and that kind of stuff. And I run to exercise. But I honestly cannot think of something that, before all this stuff, before these things, I did to unwind. So I'm almost in awe that art has maintained as an outlet for you, both for, relieving stress and for creating something.
Yeah, that's been the funny ha-ha. But my friends in that are runners, and you may find the same thing, is you run and you get endorphins released. So when you get endorphins released, you feel better.
Is that what the art does for you?
That keeps you hooked on running. That's what kept me hooked in art, because it does the same thing. All
right. And so I'm a blogger, a podcaster, a writer, and I've done some editing. These are plenty of titles, and people have a general idea of what they are. But I don't want to beat around the bush too much. Like, what are we talking about when we're talking about art?
So I started when I was a teenager. I used to go around with a little tiny purse thing that went across my chest. And in it, it was just big enough in the pouch to carry a pencil, a small pad of paper, and an eraser. So it was very small. And I used to draw anything and everything I could see, but I never shared it with anybody. And the few times my family caught me drawing, they would go, oh, well, that looks pretty good. Or who's that supposed to be? And I would draw, you'd see a book and there'd be an interesting face on it. So I'd draw the face or whatever. But it wasn't something that was picked up on. And it wasn't something encouraged beyond a hobby. Because in those days, to make a living as an artist was thought to mean you were going to starve to death.
I don't think that's changed. I still think, I think that for the most part, the myth of the starving artist has endured for.
Yeah, it is a myth.
I mean, it's a myth, but like most of the artists I know have day jobs. Like,
right.
I don't know anybody who's, I guess, I mean, if you took away any of their day jobs, they would, by definition, probably be starving artists. But most of the starving artists I know aren't starving because they have day jobs.
Right. Well, I'm working on the idea that you don't have to be starving, and I'm part of a marketing group that she doesn't believe we have to be starving artists. So we're trying to break the mold of the starving artist. So I'm bringing what I've learned as an entrepreneur from physiotherapy, where I started not one, but two businesses from scratch. I've done one where I had basically no money behind it and knew how long it takes to build that up. The second time had some money, so I did it in a fraction of the time.
Now,
Need that help.
When you go to school for physiotherapy, is creating your own business and being an entrepreneur in it, like
no.
So that was something you did. That wasn't necessarily the path.
I did, and I had to learn as I went. So the first time around, it took me 3 to 5 years to get it solid. Okay. So I have my analogy that I'm in the ocean treading water, and I see something down below once in a while. This is in my first year.
Okay.
And once in a while, something nudges my feet, and it's not a shark. And by the end of the second year, my feet are starting to get dry. By the end of the third year, I'm standing on a small little island. And I do mean small because it's just a bit bigger than my feet.
Okay.
And then it just grows from there. So that was the first time.
Well, but before that first time, do you have any business sense at all, or are you learning that as you go along too?
Well, I came to understand that I wasn't somebody who liked being told what to do, when to do it, all that stuff. So I didn't naturally fall into the typical employee mold.
You and I are kindred spirits there, because I have a hard time playing the game. I think I can be an employee,
right?
But I have a hard time maintaining the status quo just for status quo's sake.
Yeah, well, a friend said a long time ago, you can either decide to become part of the game and play their rules, or you don't. And I recognize that I don't like most of the other rules that are out there. I find them controlling. They try and curtail your creativity. So it naturally became something that I was going to find. And once I stepped into outside of hospital-based physio into private practice, I went, oh, you can do this? And then it was, you can take it a step further and have your own business. And I went, wow, okay. So I opened my first business at 28. And that to me seemed a bit old, but it was fine.
I think
I did that and ran.
I think one of the things, and it's not just talking to people on this podcast, I think it's talking to people in general.
Yeah.
I think we all get hung up on age in a way where we can find ourselves either ahead of the game or behind the game based on standards that don't really exist, but we think they exist. So 28's not old. Like I'm.
No, it's not. But it was just going for me because I graduated physio at 21. So this is 7 years in, and I'm going. It took me 7 years to figure this out.
Okay, but
right?
I'm in the same boat with you for those first 7 years. Like I graduate with a degree in communications, and for 7 years after graduation, I'm in retail trying to figure out what to do with my life.
Yeah. But that's one of the fun things that I've come to understand later is that all the experiences I had in those 7 years working in hospital and then going into private practice all added to my knowledge base so that I would be okay and have all that experience to fall back on. So it worked.
And then the second one?
So the second one, I just duplicated what I did in the first one, but I had money. So instead of it taking me 3 years, it took 18 months to have my fully And the island was way bigger by then because of the money behind me.
Yeah.
So I was actually, instead of like at year 3, it was like I was at year 5 in 18 months.
And was the second one successful?
Oh, yeah, it's been fine.
So, I mean, I guess I would ask, what was the change of heart to now go into art professionally? I guess I'll say that, like to put a label on it. Like what moving the entrepreneurship away from physio and into art? What's the change?
Oh, well, this was my 3rd attempt at leaving physio. I got into physio because I had hurt my back when I was 15 and needed to figure out what had happened and what I could do about it.
Okay.
So when I finally got out of pain 19 years later, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but there was no such thing as career counseling to go and talk to. So you either went back to school to do some other training, and by the time I'd finished my degree in physio, I didn't want to go back to university again. So then it was, okay, I stay in physio then till I figure it out.
Is it an extended program? Like, can you get it in just 4 years, or is it extended beyond?
When I did it, it was 4 years. Okay. Now it's not that. You have to have your undergrad in place, and then you do a master's.
Wow. Okay.
So I did a Bachelor of Science, but it was over a 4-year period.
So you saved 2 years.
Yeah, well, yeah. And then I just kept doing courses and studying and all that kind of stuff because I'm one of these global thinkers. So I go A, B, C, Z.
Yeah.
And pattern, and then have to go find the information of what I've missed, right? So I go off on this course or another course or whatever to help fill in the picture. So I did that for years.
All right. So now we fast forward to 2019. Well, I guess it wouldn't be 2019, right? Like,
well, it was actually January of 2006 was my next time I was going to leave physio.
Okay.
But again, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Now,
so
real
now
quick,
we're at
so
2019.
So, what are the turning points? I know you didn't actually end up leaving, but was there something that happened in like 2006 where you go, all right, I want to get out? Or is it just like, I'm not happy? Or like what is it in 2006 that you're like, I need to get out? Because my first professional gig, I got let go because of a change in leadership. I'll be honest, I was comfortable. I probably just would have stayed there for better or worse. I mean,
right.
That's a different ball game, but like, I didn't have that, oh, I got to get out of here moment. So I'm curious as to like, you tried to get out a couple times. Was it just like, I want to do something else?
Yeah, but I wasn't sure what. I had rediscovered drawing and then painting because I'd only done photography before then.
Okay.
So from like high school into university and up until 2003, I was only doing photography. And I had the opportunity to take a drawing and painting class when I was living in the UK and went, oh my God, I found it again. And I'm not letting it go this time. So I was traveling with physio as a way to see the world, which was one of the other reasons I had gotten into physio, and traveled and did art, painting and drawing and all that stuff while I was away. So when I came home to Canada again in Christmas 2005, I needed to decide what I was going to do for work. But again, going back to school was like, it's really not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So what do? Well, you open a physio practice again and keep doing art on the side. So then I discovered pottery, and it just added another dimension to what I do. And, I would sell the odd piece here and there in some of the group art shows I was in, but it wasn't satisfactory. And I wanted to have a larger audience. And yeah.
What is it about creation that you enjoy so much? Because, you start with drawing and then you move to painting and then pottery, and all of them are forms of creation, really. And whether you're, mimicking the modern world or just creating something out of thin air, like, you're creating something, and they're very, I won't say very, but they feel vastly different from each other. So is it just any point of contact with, your hands to the page or the clay is good and you're comfortable, and if I gave you another medium, you'd probably fall in love with that? Or is it just those that are just special somehow?
No, the photography is a way to, because I did a course years ago called the Art of Photography with he was a musician, and he did this on the side because he went off and he would take photographs. So you got to start using your artistic eye, and that's what made me fall in love with photography.
Okay.
Then it was, even in physio, I ended up bringing the art into physio because, again, as a global thinker, I would look at what was going on and go, oh, there it is. Where a lot of my physio colleagues are linear, and there's no problem with being one way or another.
Yeah.
But they go from A to B to B to C all the way up, right?
Yeah.
I would have gone A, B, C, Z. And they go, how did you get there? And I'd go, well, you didn't see the pattern? And they wouldn't see the pattern. So me, it's all about patterns. So that fits more with art, because art, when I'm doing art, even when I'm doing pottery, if I'm carving, there will be a pattern that emerges. So often sculptors will talk about the fact that they look at the marble and the object is there and they have to get it out, right?
Yeah.
So they see a pattern in it, is all I can come up with the way I view things. So I've carved a pattern. So when I'm painting, I've been an observer, I've seen all kinds of stuff, and then you get into your quiet space and you paint, and there it is.
Do you have trouble explaining the in between? Like, you go from A to B to C to Z, and you just go, sometimes you just go, I saw it. And you just can't, because I find that sometimes, I will arrive at an answer and I can't always explain how I got to that answer. Like, it's just like, oh no, I saw it and I thought that that's where it's going. Why? That's where I saw it going. Like, I sometimes, I think, I don't know if I categorize myself as a global thinker. I think that sometimes I have foresight, and I can see big picture things and sometimes small details. But sometimes the big picture stuff, I just see it, or I just know it, or like, I can't always give the why. It reminds me, like, unfortunately, it takes me immediately back to like middle and high school, where it's like, oh, what's the answer to the problem? It's like, oh, it's 46. Like, why? Is it wrong? Like, I thought the answer was 46. No, the answer is 46. You have to show your work. Like, no, why? And sometimes I have trouble.
Yeah, but that's the difference between a linear and a global thinker. Like, linear thinker wants you to put down all the steps that you took to prove that you actually got to that answer. And a global goes, 1, 2, 3, 10. And they're going, how did you get 10? And I'm going, well, isn't it obvious?
Yeah,
and they're like, no, how did you get there? And you're like, well, you go you went from here to there, to there, to there. And then you didn't see this? And they go, no, I didn't see a circle. So I don't know if it's the difference with doing paint by numbers or when you follow A to B, B to C, and it becomes an elephant, right?
Yeah, or sometimes you just see the elephant.
So sometimes you just see the elephant and
Okay.
you're going, oh, well, there's an ear. And they're going, how did you see that? And I'm going, you didn't see the shape? They don't see the shape. They just see the A, B, C, D. So it's just how our brains are different. That's all.
So before we get into the art entrepreneurship of a few years ago, I want to ask you about the different mediums that you've all mentioned. Do you have a favorite, or is it based on mood? You know, like I'm feeling I want to get involved in some clay, or I want to grab my camera, or I want to grab a pencil or a paintbrush, or do you have a favorite or a go-to?
I actually don't. It's more convenience, but I love all the mediums I do. I don't always do them all the time just because of time constraints or whatever.
Yeah.
They're similar in they're still creative, but they're so different in what you can create out of them.
Yeah.
That they just keep me intrigued.
So never a boring day for Janice.
No. And I'm looking forward to the day that I only do art.
I have to tell you that I have been lucky enough in the jobs that I have had, and I've been both unemployed and employed on and off over the last little bit, but for the longest time I had a job that changed every day. And most of the jobs I've held in between have all kind of changed all the time. And I feel like I connect with you on that. I don't know if I could do the whole automaton thing. You know, what'd you do at work today? Oh, the same thing I did yesterday.
Yeah. The one thing for physio that was the saving grace when it was more the automatic type is that the people you interacted with were different all the time.
Okay.
So I can do the work at the hospital because the people are so different.
Yeah, there's at least one variable changing, and it's a pretty important variable.
Well, there has to be something change, or I need to create change.
Do you think that's part of the, I don't know, impetus behind trying to get out of physio?
Well, that's the impetus that gets you into being an entrepreneur, because well, this is from my perspective, but
sure.
For me, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it well.
Okay.
I don't want to just do it because I'm collecting a paycheck. I want to make a difference. And if I'm in the driver's seat, I can determine how much change, how much I do towards that. Whereas if I'm the employee, there's always somebody else saying, no, you might want that, but that's not how it's going to be here.
So how do you reconcile wanting to help people or to affect change and making money? Because and like, this is a very personal experience, but like in my experience, most of the time I can affect the most change is usually for the least amount or no money. And so as an entrepreneur, personally, I've kind of fallen into, I need to find a money guy. Like I can put the business plan together, but I need somebody who's going to be like diligent and like, okay, we're going to charge for that and I'm going to go after the money, versus me who's like, I helped that person. That's done.
Right. but you again, and this is one of the things I learned with exploring entrepreneurship and what that all means, is you need to know your personality type.
Yeah.
So the people that make it as entrepreneurs are people who have drive, they're ambitious, they are prepared to do whatever they need to do to make it work, but they also know they have to constantly look at it to see if it's still viable. And if it's not, you make a change, or you retire, or you sell it, or whatever.
You've been in the physio game for 37 years. I guess.
In June. Yeah, I start my 37th year in June. Yep.
So the obvious question to me would be, why not just retire and do the art thing as retirement?
Oh, no, I've got big plans of what I want to do with the art. So
Okay.
I want to, part of what I'm doing is I love the ocean. I care about all the aquatic creatures. I'm in love with whales, dolphins, turtles, and I'm doing art and connecting with different charities. So when I do artwork that has a whale, dolphin, or turtles in it right now, I donate part of those proceeds to those groups that then help make sure that the oceans stay alive. Because if our oceans die, we're screwed.
Yeah. No, I mean,
So this is where I laugh, because that's what my drive was when I was looking to be an oceanographer years and years ago.
She's finally come full circle.
So I've come full circle, and then I further laugh because I did some of those things with the guidance counselors in high school, and what they said my career should be was an art teacher, which of course I laughed at the time. But now I am at the age I am, and I'm looking to start an art academy.
Well, it would beg the question, though, that as a physio, I mean, you're one-on-one a lot of the time, but you're still, I mean, you're basically a teacher, because you're teaching me what I have to do to put my body back together, in essence. I mean, I'm distilling it quite a bit, but...
Well, I've been a teacher of aquatics. So I was a swimming instructor and lifeguard. Then I did adapted aquatics and was a adapted aquatic instructor before I got into physio. So I was already teaching.
Okay.
Then in physio, I got to teach clients one-on-one in groups, teach students. So I had to learn all the learning styles and all that kind of stuff so that I could present stuff in a way that the people could understand. Then I got into being a Tai Chi instructor, and now I'm going to put in my art academy what I know about stress, what I know about Tai Chi, and what I know about art together. So my whole focus for the art academy is stress less, create more.
I will tell you, as I don't consider myself an artist. Writer, yes. Podcaster, yes. Storyteller, maybe. I haven't written poetry, and I have a friend whose book of poetry I'm editing, who always tells me that I should write poetry again. He's probably the only person that remembers I've ever written poetry, and probably the only person in the world who remembers any of my old poems. But I don't consider myself an artist. But I do consider myself a creator. And in that regard, I will tell you that creation is... Like, I immediately have the whole, like, John Hammond from the Jurassic Park movie, like, creation is an act of sheer will. But to me, creation is a stress relief. Like, I don't even have to hit publish on these episodes or on the blog posts or this or that. I just need to get it out and I feel better.
Yes, because you found writing is your creative outlet.
Yeah.
So that's what the whole premise of the Art Academy is. So it isn't art as painting, drawing. It's art in its entirety.
As find your outlet.
So we're going to help you find your voice, whatever your voice is. So I'll be working with painters and potters and photographers. It could be writers, whatever. I don't know. I haven't put a defined definition of it because that's too stifling.
Well, you want to keep it as broad as possible so that you can be as inclusive as possible because, I wouldn't agree with it. Okay. I want to preface it by saying I wouldn't agree with it, but I could see the argument for telling me I'm an artist. Like I could see the argument. I don't agree with the argument, but I can see it. So I understand that.
Totally fine, because I look at writers and I go, well, if you want to call yourself a writer, that's okay. But a writer is a creative outlet.
Yes.
You're still an artist. So you're creating something.
Yeah.
And that's what painters do. That's what potters do. That's what photographers do. We all create things. We alter it, change it, put it down on paper, and there it is.
So where does the seed for an art academy, start for you? Like, is it just recently, or like, is it something that maybe you thought of and laughed at long ago, or like it's just always kind of been germinating in the back of your mind?
Oh no, I laughed at the whole idea when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But I think they planted a seed. And that's what I've said my whole physio career. What I do is I plant seeds, and I have no idea when they're going to grow. So if a client likes what I have to say, they'll make an appointment. If they don't, they could wait a couple of years. So I've had clients who went, I wish I came and saw you 3 years ago for this problem. And I said, well, you weren't ready. And they just look at me like, huh? I'm like, well, you weren't ready.
Yeah, no,
if you're not ready, what's the point in trying it? Because you're not going to be in sync with it, right?
I think that that's true. This podcast is a couple years old. I've been in podcasting a heck of a lot longer. And in the early days, I got a lot of flack for like, well, how come you don't start your own show? Like, how come you're not doing it? I was like, I'm not ready. And I can say the thing that everybody says, which is like, well, once I started it, I can look back and go like, maybe I should have started this sooner. But hindsight's always a winner. And so in the moment, if you're not ready, you're not ready. So I agree with you. I think like when it's time, it's time.
Well, you have to take that pressure off your shoulders because it interferes with the creative process. It's a catch-22 there.
Well, I think the other, and I say this because I think it bears repeating, right? In the first episode of this podcast, my buddy Bill Sweeney was on to talk about a book, but it was really about should you stay or should you go? And Bill always likes to tell the story that when he first created the original incarnation of the Wicked Theory podcast, he bought the microphone, he bought the mixer. Well, he bought the microphones and the mixer. And then he talked to people about creating the show. And that was enough to satisfy him, so he didn't actually have to start the show. And it wasn't until he actually broke down and started the show that he was like, oh, I like this. Because, talking about a thing releases the same endorphins as doing the thing some of the time. Not for everything, but often enough when we come to creative passions and we get the thinking done and we say, hey, I'm going to do this thing and this is what I'm thinking. if you talk about it enough, you don't have to do it because you're comfortable enough and you're getting that same rush from talking about it. And look, Bill's not the only one. I think that some of us, because I've done this before too, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. No, I'm going to do this thing. No, I'm going to do this. And it's just on a to-do list for a year before you actually break down and break ground on it or what have you.
But you also have to do your, and I hate this term, but your due diligence. So you have to gather information, ponder it out, look at what you possibly want to do, and then you jump in the middle of the ocean and start treading water. So eventually you have to either do the impetus of jump in,
yeah,
or nothing more happens to it.
Yeah. And then, I think the older I get, I don't want to make this an age thing, but I think that the older I get, the more I'm likely to just jump in. Because what's the worst that could happen? I drown. Oh no. Like I've never failed at anything before in my life. No, I've failed plenty of times.
Yeah, that's also what happens with experience.
Yeah.
So you got experience behind you. When you're younger, you jump in because you don't know, you need to do some research. Then you get old enough that you go, okay, I don't have enough research. And then you're drowning in the research. And then you finally go, I need to go.
Yeah.
So I almost started to drown in the research of ways to get my art out to more people for the art sales of what I'm trying to do. But I got the impetus in January, and then I jumped in. Now, when I jumped in, it was pretty messy. I look back on some of the videos and go, oh, wow, my heavens. Okay, well, anyway, it's a learning experience, and people are realizing I'm learning as I go because I'm just making sure they know I'm in a learning curve. It's going to get better over time.
I think that's true of all. I want to say art, but I think anything we've created, even if it's not art, even if you're just writing a book report, okay? Like everybody's had to write a book report from about 5th grade through, high school graduation and then maybe college, etc.
Yep.
Go back. If you have access to your 6th grade book report, we're not going to call it art, but guess what? You could probably do better now. And the same is true for my first podcast episode of this show. I love Bill. I think we had a great conversation. The editing could probably be tighter. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's always, you're never going to start off at 100.
Oh, no. And anybody who thinks they're going to start a business and be at 100 really quickly, no, that's not how it goes. Yeah, it goes all over the place. Like you think you're going from A to Z and you end up off on a tangent that took you over to 45.
Yep.
And then you're back on the path that's A to Z, and then you're over here to B2, and you're going, what am I doing over here? I'm supposed to be over there. All right, what am I? Yeah, okay, back we go. And then we're on the path again. Yeah. So you end up all over the place. And that's the process.
Now, I am going to try. I'm going to ask a very selfish question in the way I'm asking it. And I understand it's a weighted question. But when it comes to the Art Academy, what are you hoping to get from your interactions with students? Because I can only guess that your students and the people you interact with as it grows will have an impact on you, and they will also help bounce you, Janice, not the academy, but they will personally bounce you from A to 1 to 7 to Z, right? Like, I think that teachers that are open and you sound like an open teacher, can be also moved by their students. So I think I want to ask selfishly, are you just a raft on the river and it will take you where you want to go, or do you have a paddle and you're going to try and get somewhere?
So I have a paddle and I have a plan.
Okay.
I've learned being a physio that I learn as much from my clients as they learn from me. So there's a two-way street of learning.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the same thing for the Art Academy. I just recognized through COVID, and this has been the impetus, is I have so many people that I know that are stressed out beyond with everything that's happened in the last almost 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And some of them are struggling, they're having trouble, they're having health challenges. We've seen some of the information out there that's talking about how long it took people to recover from being in SARS. Now, SARS, when it was here for about 9 months.
Yeah.
When it was here in Ontario. They were treating people for post-traumatic stress stuff and depression, anxiety, and other stress-related stuff for 1.5 years afterwards.
Yeah, and this has been 2.5
And
years.
it's
So
been 2.5 years. So
Yeah.
Guess what? We're going to be somewhere around 6, 7, 8 years just recovering from that. Then we've got thrown into all the stuff that's going on with the potential war with Russia.
yeah, I think you're probably on the right track.
So there's a lot of people that are very stressed out about the whole situation in the world and like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in my time unemployed in the last few years, I talked to a lot of people who are overworked and fairly underappreciated, and they were, I guess their bosses were were under the idea that, well, you're lucky to be employed, and look, I think that a lot of bosses probably have more compassion than that, but from the top down, I think compassion gets lost often. And so I see a lot of people that if you just removed all of the other things, they would still be stressed out. Like the world is not helping, but I think even when you remove the world, there's a lot of people that are that could use an outlet of any kind.
Yeah. So that's part of what was the impetus for putting this together. Plus, I recognize through the whole situation with COVID, when my stress level goes up higher, I create a lot less. So it impacts on my ability to produce art of any sort. So if I know what to do to reduce my stress, and I'm teaching people that all the time as a physio, and I know how much it's impacted me as an artist, I went, well, maybe it's time to just bring these three things together.
Yeah. I think that it's one of those weird scenarios, and I think most artists have a general idea, like a sense of it, where it's like, I need to be creating, but I don't feel like creating. And we have these, I guess you would call them internal struggles. I don't think they're actually I don't think they're struggles, because I don't think they're ever fair fights. I think when you're unmotivated or depressed, it's really hard. Like you need a major internal victory to go from uninspired and depressed to creating. And I think we all have those wins on occasion where it's like, oh, I have an idea now. And it's that one idea, that inspiration, that muse, that moment that pushes you over the top and gets you past the lack of motivation and the depression to create something. But it's never a fair fight. We need that inspiration and that motivation in order to make it a fair fight. At least for me. Like, I understand that if I don't have that great opening line, I'm probably not writing that post today. I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah, but what I was experiencing, and when I talked to other people, they were experiencing, when you get into that creative space, it's what happens when you're quiet and calm, and then it can happen. So if you're stressed or over anxious or whatever,
Yep.
you can't calm down enough. So that's what these stress techniques are for. That's what the Tai Chi's for. Some people use yoga. I love Tai Chi. Do that. That's why people go out and run. That's why people do long distance swimming, because you get in that zone, and the zone is what they're talking about, is that quiet space where everything's fine and random thoughts can come in, creative ideas come in, and all of a sudden you're going, oh, I need to paint that, or I need to write that down, or I need to grab my camera, or whatever it is.
That things came full circle for Janice as a result of seeds planted long ago, some that she didn't even realize were planted in the first place, is of note. That they finally germinated and grew probably takes the metaphor a bit too far. The point is, it's not necessarily that you even realize the seeds were sown. We don't all have the recall or memory to know exactly where things come from, and I applaud Janice for wanting more and going after it. During the course of this podcast, I have said that I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, a baseball player, paleontologist, rock star, and many other things. Aerospace engineer came from my wonder of space travel. I don't know where that came from. Baseball player came from my love of the game, passed down from my father and family. Paleontologist predates my having watched Jurassic Park, so perhaps it's just a general interest in dinosaurs that many young children share. And rock star, well, if you've ever picked up an instrument like guitar, bass, or drums during your teenage years, you know where that seed gets sown. But I'm none of those things, and I'm still figuring out what I want to be. Will it be something that has been planted? I don't know that I'll recall. And as you've heard me say before, and as you've heard from many previous guests, where they arrived is where they arrived. But it was as much happenstance or luck or generally life happening that brought them to their current destination. We enjoy the full circle talk because it means that we have an idea of where we will end up. We just haven't uncovered the clue yet. But it's not always as such. We've seen too many movies and watched too much TV. Too many things get set up and come to fruition. That's not how it always works. Sometimes it does, and maybe you end up where you intended. But sometimes you end up where you are and you have no idea how you got there, and that's fine too. The important thing is that you are happy and content with where you end up. So let me ask you this. Are you? Are you content? Are you happy? Are you good with it? And if not, what are you doing to change that? Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 74. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer and this show at the Palmer Files. You can find more information about Janice, her passion, and her art academy at janicewebber.com. That's JANICEWEBBER.com. From there, you can also contact Janice or join her on Facebook, as well as actually see her work in painting, pottery, and photography. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Janice, do you have one final question for me?
So you said that you had oscillated on starting your blog and podcast, and you have tried a bunch of different platforms. What was your impetus to get started on this, and do you have a favorite?
The blog was just a writing exercise. Really, that's what it started out as, and it turned into something much more. The podcast, I'd seen other people do it, and I was very comfortable helping other people behind the scenes and guesting on other people's shows. I think they're both very interesting. Before I started the podcast, I did leaning into the spy theme for the blog. I was doing interrogations, which were long form conversational / question and answer type blog posts with a guest. And I haven't done one for a very long time because I have this. You know, why do I need to send you 15 questions and then have you send me answers and then me send follow-ups and then kind of cobble it together in a conversation when I can just invite you onto, this medium. Mm-hmm. And I think that this medium is a bit more personal, but I'm still in love with the writing. I'm actually in love with both processes. But I think that whether it's a book review or just what's on my shelf or what I'm thinking about or a list, I enjoy the process of creating something out of nothing. And I think that the same is true in this medium when we're talking about like the podcast. I think they're both unique. I love them equally. I guess what the answer to the question is, I can't see my life without either.
See, that's where we're similar. I can't vision a life without art in it.
Yeah. And I feel like, well, I don't consider myself an artist, unless I get back into the more of the creative writing thing. I guess I'd be more of a I was gonna say a narrative storyteller, really. Medium length text and long form audio storytelling is basically where I'm at right now. But I think that I connect with artists on a level because in general, I find that creatives, period, have to be in love with the entire process in order to complete anything, right? So I have to, if it's, as an example, if it's a book review, I have to be in love with the idea of reading the book, taking the notes, digesting that information, and then repurposing it to tell you why you should read it or what you might find of value within that book. And then I have to edit that. And then I have to post it. And part of posting most of my book reviews is physically taking pictures of the book that I just read. And I have to be in love with every part of that process because the blog post at the end has pictures and text, right? Like, and in order to get it all done, I need to be in love with every piece of the process. For this podcast, I have to be willing to reach out to a guest. I have to be willing to take rejection. I have to be willing to schedule. And I have to be flexible when things go wrong. And then I have to know on the technical side how to record everything, how to edit everything. When I go back and I take notes for the show notes and for, scripting my intros and outros and mixing it all together, I have to be in love with every part of the process. Otherwise, it doesn't get published. And I think artists are all like that. I don't know one artist that loves framing.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Except that's part of it, and they do it.
You're perspective on framing.
I just, people, they have to do it. You know.
I know, but I love being able to frame my artwork.
Okay.
But I choose the frames and the mats when I'm doing watercolors.
Okay.
Or oils. I do just the frames. And my frames all make the art look better. So I'm coming from a different perspective when I was doing my framing company with someone else who came from the idea that the framing should just be in the background so it doesn't compete with the artwork. My perspective is the framing needs to be part of the artwork.
See, on that, you and I agree. What I meant was most of the artists I know don't enjoy the process of it, but I will tell you, I think you are 100% right, because even the animation cells that I've collected, when I was getting them professionally framed, I used to know a really good framer who would take the time to get a mat with an internal color, or however they, I don't know. I don't know the technicals of it. All I know is like
mats come in all different colors.
So
getting the right color, right?
All I know is that I would get options of like, here's the animation cell, which, most animation cells, I'm looking at them, right? Like most animation cells that I've got have a few colors, but they're not like full color. It's not like the entire spectrum. It's like on that particular cell, there's like 3 colors. And, the framer would be like, here, I think these are the options you're looking at. And it's always an accent to make the entire framed piece larger than just the sum of the parts that make up it. And I think that's, man, it's probably a lost art, which is why I don't have a framer right now anymore.
Well, it is another way to produce art. So when you've got somebody who's got the eye, the artistic eye, they get it. If they don't, they put it together and it's flat.
Yeah.